I'll make that the hour. And wow, thank you for proclaiming yourself to be a rat. It's always nice when someone chooses to side with me over lamp, however briefly they do that. And I'm very grateful for it. Yeah. Thank you everyone for being here. I do so much appreciate it. Yeah. So, as always, I always say as always my name is SkitterSkreetch, and then I'm like, well wait a sec, I did this last time. You know, I can't hold it against you, I understand. We all have our weaknesses. If it was a choice between you and a piece of pizza on the floor, I like to think I'd choose you, but you just don't know until you're in the situation, right? You struggle. You live with who you are, and you have to get by with that. Oh. Anyway. We all have our inner demons. And speaking of demons, let's go see Marn. So for anyone who, so here's Lamp, as always, and of course, we'll have our first order of business, where we've got to thank our good friend Wild Evil Woman for getting first, for the 7th time. Let me just mark you on the board. Will we go to the void today, folks? What do you reckon? Let's find out. Ooh. Oh, no void today. One day I'll prepare ahead of time so we can have like an actual poll on that. It'll be fun. I'm doing very well, Abbe. I hope you're doing equally as well. But yeah, so that's our first order of business. And once again today we have a second order of business, but it's not a badge today because I just didn't make a badge today. Couldn't really think of one. I guess I could have done some sort of play on the fleece, like the golden fleece. Meh. Hey. But yeah. Wild, are you confused with my frequent shadows? They're each independent and complete and unique individuals, all with their own complete and complex lives and personalities. You really got to catch up on your SkitterSkreetch lore. Yeah, the SkitterSkreetch lore. You guys are also lore now, I've decided. I mean, there's all the stuff about the library and lamp and all that, but you guys as well, you're lore now. I mean, I guess literally, you guys are on the board. You're in this too. You're part of it. Weird. I never really thought about that. Yeah. I mean, why are you saying, yeah, you literally have been on here. We had that whole arc where we did Fugi Theatre together. You're literally part of the lore. Lamp decided that that it was bad for my mental health to be completely on my own all the time, so we organised the whole thing. Like, you are part of the lore. That's not even like a question there. You're in here, Blake. You can't escape. I mean, literally, because you're also banned in the video game, but you can't escape being part of the lore. The lore is all pervading, it's everywhere. I'm talking about the Tao again, I think. Anyway. You know what, Wild, you're so right there. Second breakfast would be excellent. But yeah. The lore is ever encompassing and stretching ever further. One day everyone on Twitch will be part of the SkitterSkreetch lore. It's like a plague. Like an eaten by plague. Hey, I don't know where I'm going with this. Anyway. But yeah, I mentioned I had a second thing to do today, and it's not badges, and it's not followers. So it is obviously the third thing, which is to say, we have new books. So, where do we go? Oh yeah. So after the last night's reading with the Oscar Wilde, where I found out that I really did like some of his stuff, I thought I'd go out and get a bit more of that. And so I went to a place that I thought there was some, and you know, a little tussle with some beasts, a little bit of digging, about 3 hours of dragging books back because it was quite far away, and here we go. We got 2 stories here by him. The Picture of Dorian Gray, which is on the sort of longer side. I think that's one I'll try and do in one sitting again, like as like a marathon, but it will be quite a long one, so I don't know if I'll succeed. And then Lord Arthur Savile's Crime, which is shorter, probably comparable to today's story that we're going to do. So yeah, we'll be doing them some point in the future. Which is, I mean, I can't go against it because I'm trying to burn through the backlog here a bit, and then I've gone and got more of it because I like them. But yeah, but what are we doing now? There's something we do today. Oh yeah, of course. So, that's the orders of business taken care of. So, as always, we do a little bit of poetry while we wait for people to have a chance to arrive. So, today we got a new collection, because I don't know that Apollonius of Rhodes ever did any poetry, and if he did, I got no access to it. So I've got a book here by a fellow by the name of Thomas Hardy, who There's like a whole section of him I think has some fiction in it, so I'll probably read some other stuff of his at some point. But today we've got some poems by him, so we'll be breaking into that. Let me just move the mic over to our poetry reading position, and we'll get started. And that's more like it, I should hope. Now then, this is a small volume, a collection called Woman Much Missed. We shall be beginning at the beginning with a poem by the name of When I Set Out for Lyonesse. When I set out for Lyonesse, 100 miles away, the rime was on the spray, and starlight lit my loneliness. When I set out for Lyonesse, 100 miles away. What would be chance at Lyonesse, while I should sojourn there? No prophet durst declare, nor did the wisest wizard guess. What would be chance at Lyonesse, while I should sojourn there? When I came back from Lyonesse, with magic in my eyes, all marked with mute surmise, my radiance rare and fathomless, when I came back from Lyonesse, with magic in my eyes. The next poem we have, which I'm sure will be a controversial one given the audience, is Shut Out That Moon. Close up the casement, draw the blind, shut out that stealing moon. She wears too much the guise she wore before our lutes were strewn, with years deep dust and names we read on white stones were hewn. Step not forth on the dew-dashed lawn to view the lady's chair. Immense Orion's glittering form the less and greater bear. Stay in, to such sights we were drawn, when faded ones were fair. Brush not the bough for midnight scents that come forth lingeringly, and wake the same sweet sentiments that breathed to you and me. When living seemed a laugh and love, all it was said to be. Within the common lamplit room, prison my eyes and thought. Let dingy details crudely loom, mechanic speech be wrought. Too fragrant was life's early bloom, too tart the fruit it brought. Hello Nazca, good to have you. You've just come in on our start of some poetry by Thomas Hardy. Good to have you. Welcome in, I hope you're doing well. But yes, now that we've passed the, censure of the moon, let's move on to happier poetry, hopefully. This is a little subsection of the poetry labelled Poems of 1912 through 13. Veteris vestigia flammae. The going. Why did you leave no hint that night, that quickly after the morrow's dawn, and calmly as if indifferent quite, you would choose your term here and up be gone, where I could not follow, with wings of swallow, to gain one glimpse of you ever anon, never to bid goodbye, or lip me the softest call, or utter a wish for word while I saw morning harden upon the wall, unmoved, unknowing that your great going had placed that movement and altered all. Why do you make me leave the house, and think for a breath it is you I see, at the end of the alley of bending boughs, where so often at dusk you used to be, till in darkening darkness the yawning blankness of the perspective sickens me. You were she who abode by those red-veined rocks far west. You were the swan-necked one who rode along the beeling beanie crest, and reigning nigh me would muse and eye me while life unrolled us its very best. Why then latterly did we not speak? Did we not think of those days long dead? And ere your vanishing strive to seek that time's renewal, we might have said, in this bright spring weather we'll visit together those places that once we visited. Well, well, all's past amend, unchangeable it must go. I seem but a dead man held on end to sink down soon. Oh, you could not know, with such swift fleeing, no soul foreseeing, not even I would undo me so. Oh, this is a sad collection. Well, maybe I should have gleaned that from the title. But I think we have time for one more, so... Your last drive. Here by the moor where you returned and saw the borough lights ahead, that lit your face, all undiscerned, to be in a week the face of the dead, and you told of the charm of that hallowed view, that ne'er again would beam on you. And on your left you passed the spot where 8 days later you were to lie, and be spoken of as one who was not, beholding it with a heedless eye. As alien from you, though under its trees you soon would out-halt everlastingly. I drove not with you, yet I had sat at your side that eve. I should not have seen that the countenance I was glancing at had a last-time look in the flickering sheen, nor have read the writhing upon your face. I go hence soon to my resting place. You may miss me then, but I shall not know how many times you visit me there, or what your thoughts are, or if you go there ever at all. And I shall not care, should you censure me, I shall take no heed, and even your praises no more shall need. True, never you'll know, and you will not mind. But shall I then slight you because of such? Dear ghost, in the past do you ever find the thought, what profit moved me much? Yet abides the fact indeed the same. You are past love, praise, indifference, blame. Oh, not only is it a sad one, it's a very good one too. I feel that in the marrow of me. Well. A grim point to end on. But we are on the clock today, and so there is no time to dwell on sorrow. So we shall have to push through. Excuse me a moment while I fix the microphone to its normal place. Right then. Ooh. Yeah, like I said, no time to dwell on that, so let's be about it, shall we? So yeah, today, as I've mentioned a few places, we're going to be doing Jason and Medea by Apollonius of Rhodes, which I believe is an extract of the Argonautica. And like I say, it should run us to round about the 2-hour mark. Maybe a little shy, depending on how it goes. It's about 50 pages, but they're small pages. The text is probably reasonably dense, so we'll see how we go. But if we run a little over, that's fine. If we run a little under, that's fine. That's the plan anyway. So let me have a quick drink of water, and we'll do our usual spiel. You're out for you. Alright then. So, as I always say, but always mean, if at any point you should miss something that I've said, either due to my poor diction, due to some interference, mechanical or technical, or due to some other aspect of life distracting you, do feel free to let me know, and I'm happy to hear from you. There aren't really breaks in this text, as far as I'm aware, but I'm happy to hear from you, make comment, and answer any questions. If you have thoughts, comments, questions, I'm always happy to hear from you. Love to talk to the community, love all of you so very much. But yeah, if at this moment you want to make any redeems happen, this is a good time for it. I'll take another quick drink of water while I give you a chance to do that. So saying I do what I say, I drink again, you're out. And assuming now that the stream is caught up and you've had time to do it and chosen not to do so, we shall instead press on. So, without any further ado, if you are sitting comfortably, I shall begin. Come, Eros, come, lovely muse, stand by me and take up the tale. How did Medea's passion help Jason to bring back the fleece to Apollonius? You that share Aphrodite's power must surely know. You that fill virgin hearts with love's inquietude, and bear a name that speaks of love's delight. We left the young lords lying there, concealed among the rushes, but ambushed though they were, Hera and Athena saw them, and at once withdrew from Zeus and the rest of the immortal gods into a private room to talk the matter over. Here began by sounding Athena, daughter of Zeus, she said. Let me hear you first. What are we to do? What do you think of some ruse that might enable them to carry off Acetus's golden fleece to Hellas? Or should they speak him fair in the hope of winning his consent? I know the man is thoroughly intractable, but all the same, no method of approach should be neglected. Here, said Athene quickly, you put to me the very question I have been turning over in my mind. But I must admit that, though I have racked my brains, I have failed so far to think of any scheme that might commend itself to the noble lords. For a while the two goddesses sat staring at the floor, each lost in her own perplexities. Eros was the first to break the silence. An idea had struck her. Listen, she said, we must have a word with Aphrodite. Let us go together and ask her to persuade her boy, if that is possible, to loose an arrow at Acetes' daughter, Medea of the many spells, and make her fall in love with Jason. I am sure that with her help he will succeed in bearing off the fleece to Hellas. This solution to their problem pleased Athene, who smilingly replied, Sprung as I am from Zeus, I have never felt the arrows of the boy, and of love charms I know nothing. However, if you yourself are satisfied with the idea, I will certainly go with you. But when we meet her, you must be the one to speak. The two goddesses rose at once, and made their way to the palace of Aphrodite, which her lame consort Hephaestus had built for her when he took her as his bride from the hand of Zeus. They entered the courtyard and paused below the veranda of the room, where the goddess slept with her lord and master. Hephaestus himself had gone early to his forge and anvils in a vast cavern on a floating island, where he used to turn out all kinds of curious metal work with the aid of fire and bellows. And Cypris, left at home, was sitting on an inlaid chair which faced the door. She had let her hair fall down on her white shoulder and was combing it with golden comb before plaiting the long tresses. When she saw the goddesses outside, she stopped and called them in, and she rose to meet them and settled them in easy chairs before resuming her own seat. Then she bound up the uncombed locks with both hands, gave her visitors a smile, and spoke with mock humility. Ladies, you honour me. What brings you here after so long? We have seen little of you in the past. To what then do I owe a visit from the greatest goddess of all? That levity of yours, said Eros, is ill-timed. We two are facing a disaster. This very moment the Lord Jason and his friends are riding at anchor in the river Phasis. They have come to fetch the fleece. Since the time for action is at hand, we are gravely concerned for all of them, particularly Aeson's son. For him I am prepared to fight with all my might and main, and I will save him, even if he sails to hell to free Ixon from the brazen chains. For I will not have King Peleus boasting that he has escaped his evil doom. Insolent Peleus, who left me out when he made offerings to the gods. Besides which, I have been very fond of Jason, ever since the time when I was putting human charity on trial. When he came home from the chase, he met me at the mouth of the Eros. The river was inspected, for all the mountains in their high spurs were under snow, and cataracts were roaring down their sides. I was disguised as an old woman, and he took pity on me, lifted me up, and carried me across the flood on his shoulders. For that I will never cease to honour him, but Peleus will not be brought to book for his outrageous conduct, unless you yourself make it possible for Jason to return. Ere had finished, for at time words failed the lady of Cyprus. The sight of Ere begging for her for favours struck her with awe, and her answer when it come was graciously, Queen of goddesses, she said, regard me as the meanest creature in the world if I fail you in your need. Whatever I can say or do, whatever strength these feeble hands possess, is at your service. Moreover, I expect no recompense. Here, choosing her words with care, replied, We are not asking you to use your hands. Force is not needed. All we require of you is quietly to tell your boy to use his wizardry, and make Aeetes' daughter fall in love with Jason. With Medea on his side, he should find it easy to carry off the golden fleece, and make his way back to Iolcus. She is something of a witch herself. But ladies, said Cypris, speaking now to both of them, he is far more likely to obey you than me. There is no reverence in him, but faced by you he may display some spark of decent feeling. He certainly pays no attention to me. He defies me and always does the opposite of what I say. In fact, I am so worn out by his naughtiness that I have half a mind to break his bow and wicked arrows in his very sight, remembering how he threatened me with them in one of his moves. He said, "If you don't keep your hands off me while I can still control my temper, you can blame yourself for the consequences." Hera and Athena smiled at this and exchanged glances. Aphrodite were up. She said, "Other people find my troubles amusing. I really should not speak of them to all and sundry. It is enough for me to know them. However, as you both have set your hearts in it, I will try and coax my boy. He will not refuse." Hera took Aphrodite's slender hand in hers, and with a sweet smile responded, "Very well, Cytherea. Play your part just as you say, but quickly, please. And do not scold or argue with your child when he annoys you. He will improve by and by." With that she rose to go. Athena followed her, and the pair left for home. Cypris too set out, and after searching up and down of Olympus for her boy, found him far away in the fruit-laden orchard of Zeus. With him was Ganymede, whose beauty had so captivated Zeus that he took him up to heaven to live with the immortals. The two lads, who had much in common, were playing with golden knuckle-bones. Eros, the greedy boy, was standing there with an old handful of them clutched to his breast, and an happy flush mantling his cheeks. Nearby sat Ganymede, hunched up, silent and disconsolate, with only two left. He threw these for what they were worth in quick succession, and were furious when Eros laughed. Of course he lost them both immediately. They joined the rest. So he went off in despair with empty hands and did not notice the goddess's approach. Aphrodite came up to her boy, took his chin in her hand and said, "Why this triumphant smile, you rascal? I do believe you won the game unfairly by cheating a beginner. But listen now. Will you be good and do me a favor I am going to ask of you? Then I will give you one of Zeus's lovely toys, the one his fond nursemaid Adriesta made for him in the Aegean cave when he was still a child and liked to play. It is a perfect ball. Festivus himself could not make you a better toy. It is made of golden hoops laced together all the way round with double stitching, but the seams are hidden by a widening dark blue band. When you throw it up, it will leave a fiery trail behind it like a meteor in the sky. That is what I'll give you if you let fly an arrow at Aeetes' girl and make her fall in love with Jason. But you must act at once, or I may not be so generous." When he heard this, Eros was delighted. He threw down all his toys, flung his arms around his mother, and hung onto her skirt with both hands, imploring her to let him have the ball at once. But she gently refused, and drawing him towards her, held him close and kissed his cheek. Then with a smile she said, "By your own dear head and mine, I swear I will not disappoint you. You shall have the gift when you have shot an arrow into Medea's heart." Eros gathered up his knuckle bones, counted them all carefully, and put them in the fold of his mother's shining robe. Fetching his quiver from where it leant against a tree, he slung it upon his shoulders with a golden strap, picked up his crooked bow, and made his way through the luxuriant orchard of Zeus's palace. Then he passed through the celestial gates of Olympus, where a pathway for the gods leads down, and twin poles, Earth's highest points, soar up in lofty pinnacles, and catch the first rays of the risen sun. And he swept on through the boundless air he saw, an ever-changing scene beneath him, and the life-supporting land with its peopled cities, and its scarred rivers, sacred rivers, here mountain peaks, and here the all-encircling sea. Meanwhile the Argonauts were sitting in a conference on the benches of their ship, where it lay hidden in the marshes of the river. Each man had taken his own seat, and Jason, who was speaking, were faced by row upon row of quiet listeners. "My friends," said he, "I am going to tell you what actions I myself should like to take, though its success depends on you. Sharing the danger as we do, we share the right of speech, and I warn the man who keeps his mouth shut when he ought to speak, that his mind, that he will be the one to wreck our enterprise. I ask you all to stay quietly on board with your arms ready, while I go up to Aeetes' palace, with the son of Phrixus and two other men. When I see him, I intend to parley with him first, and find out where he means to treat us as friends, and let's have the golden fleece, or dismiss us with contempt, relying on his own power. Warned thus by the man himself of any evil thoughts he may be entertaining, we will decide whether to face him in the field, or find some way of getting what we want without recourse to arms. We ought not to use force to rob him of his own without so much as seeing what a few words may do. It would be much better to talk to him first, and try to win him over. Speech, by smoothing the way, often succeeds, where forceful measures might have failed. Remember too that Aeetes welcomed the admirable Phrixus when he fled from his stepmother's treachery, and her father had planned to sacrifice him. Every man on earth, even the great rogue, fears Zeus, the god of hospitality, and keeps his laws. With one accord the young men approved the Lord Jason's plan, and no one having risen to suggest another, he asked the sons of Phrixus, Telamnon, the Orgius, to accompany him, and himself took the wand of Hermes in his hand. Leaving the ship, they come to dry land beyond the reeds and water, and passed on to the hard ground of the plain, which bears the name of Circe. Here osiers and willows stand in rows, with corpses dangling on ropes from their highest branches. To this day, the Colchians will think it sacrilege to burn the bodies of their men. They ne'er bury them or raise a mound above them, but wrap them in untanned oxide and hang them on a tree, a distance from the town. Thus, since it is their custom to bury women, earth and air play equal parts in the disposal of their dead. While Jason and his friends was on their way, Hera had a kindly thought for them. She covered the old town with mist so they might reach Aeetes' house unseen by any of the numerous Colchians. But as soon as they had come in from the country and reached the palace, she dispersed the mist. At the entrance they paused for a moment, and marvelled at the king's courtyard with its wide gates, the rows of soaring columns round the palace walls, and high over all the marble cornice resting on its triglyphs of bronze. They crossed the threshold of the court unchallenged. Nearby, cultivated vines covered with greenery rose high in the air, and underneath them 4 perennial springs gushed up. These was Hephaestus' work. One flowed with milk, and one with wine, the third with fragrant oil, while the fourth were a fountain of water which grew warm when the Pleiades set, but changed at their rising and bubbled up from the hollow rock as cold as ice. Such was the marvels that Hephaestus, the great engineer, had contrived for the palace, the seat in the Aeetes. He had also made him bulls with feet of bronze and bronze mouths from which breath came out of flame, blazing and terrible. And he had forged a plough of indurated steel, all in one piece, as a thank offering to Helios, who had taken him up in his chariot when he sank exhausted on the battlefield of Phlegra. There were also an inner court with many well-made folding doors leading to the various rooms, and decorated galleries to right and left. Higher buildings stood at angles to this court on either side. In one of them, the highest, King Aeetes lived with his queen. In another, his son Aspertes, whom a Caucasian nymph named Asteroidea had born to him before he married Idea, and the youngest daughter of Tethys and Ocean, Phaethon, the nickname of that young Colchian, gave up Citrus because he outshone them all. The other buildings housed the maidservants, and Chalciope and Medea, the 2 daughters of Aeetes. At the moment, Medea were going from room to room to find her sister. The goddess Hera had kept her in the house. There was a rule she did not spend her time at home, but was busy all day in the temple of Hecate, of whom she was priestess. When she saw the men, she gave a cry. Chalciope heard it, and her maids dropped their yarn and sweat bindles on the floor, and all ran out of doors. When Chalciope saw her sons among the strangers, she lifted up her hands for joy. They greeted her in the same fashion, and then, in their happiness, embraced her. But she had her moan to make. So after all, she said, you were not allowed to roam so very far from your neglected mother. Fate turned you back. But how I have suffered. This mad desire of yours for Hellas, this blind obedience to your dying father's wishes. What misery, what heartache they brought me. Why should you go to the city of Orchomenus, whomever he may be, abandoning your widowed mother for the sake of your grandfather's estate? Last of all, Aeetes with his queen, Idea, who had heard Chalciope speak and come out of the house. and at once the old courtyard were astir. A number of his men busied themselves over the carcass of a large bull. Others chopped firewood, others eating water for the baths. Not one of them took rests. They were working for the king. Meanwhile Eros, passing through the clear air, had arrived unseen and bent on mischief, like a gadfly setting out to plague the greys and heifers, the fly that cowards call the breese. In the porch, under the lintel of the door, he quickly strung his bow. From his quiver took a new arrow, fraught with pain. Still unobserved, he ran across the threshold, glancing around him sharply. Then he crouched low at Jason's feet, fitted the notch to the middle of the string, and, drawing the bow as far as his hands would stretch, shot at Medea, and her heart stood still. With an happy laugh, Eros sped out of the iron roof door on his way back, leaving his shaft deep in the girl's breast, hot as fire. Time and again she darted a bright glance at Jason. All else were forgotten. Her heart, brimful of this new augury, throbbed within her and overflowed with the sweetness of the pain. A working woman, rising before dawn to spin and needing a light in her cottage rooms, piles brushwood on a smouldering log. The oil heap kindled by the little brand goes up in a mighty blaze. Such with a fire of love, stealthy but all-consuming, swept through Medea's heart. In the turmoil of her soul, her soft cheeks turned from rose to white, and white to rose. By now the servants had prepared a banquet for the newcomers, who gladly sat down to it after refreshing themselves in warm baths. When they had enjoyed the food and drink, Aeetes put some questions to his grandsons. Sons of my daughter and of Phrixus, the most deserving guest I have ever entertained, how is it that you are back in Aea? Did some misadventure cut your journey short? You refused to listen to me when I told you what a long way you had to go, but I knew, for I myself had whirled along it in the chariot of my father Helios, when he took my sister Circe to the western lands. When we reached the coast of Tyrea, where she still lives, far, far indeed from Colchis. But enough of that. Tell me plainly what befell you, who your companions are, and where you disembarked. To answer these questions, Argus stepped out in front of his brothers, being the eldest of the four. His heart misgave him for Jason and his mission, but he did his best to conciliate the king. My lord, he said, that ship of ours soon fell to pieces in a storm. We hung to one of her planks and were cast ashore in the island of Eros, in the pitch-dark night. But Providence looked after us. There was not a sign of the war god's birds who used to haunt the desert isle. They were driven off by these men, who had landed on the previous day and been detained there by the will of Zeus in pity for ourselves. Or was it only chance? In any case, they gave us plenty of food and clothing directly they heard the illustrious name of Phrixus and your own, my lord, since it was your city they were bound for. As to their purpose, I will be frank with you. A certain king, wishing to banish and dispossess this man, because he is the most powerful of the Aeolians, has sent him here on a desperate venture, maintaining that the house of Aeolus will not escape the inexorable wrath of Zeus, the heavy burden of their guilt and vengeance for the suffering of Phrixus, till the fleece returns to Hellas. The ship that brought him was built by Pallas Athene, on altogether different lines from the Colchian craft, the rottenness of which, as luck would have it, fell to us. For she was smashed to pieces by the wind and waves, whereas the bolts of Argo held her together in any gale that blows, and she runs as sweetly when the crew are tugging at the oars as she does before the wind. This ship he manned with the pick of all Achaea, and in her he has come to your city, touching as many ports and crossing formidable seas, in the hopes that you will let him have the fleece. But it must be as you wish. He has not come here to force your hand. On the contrary, he is willing to repay you amply for the gift, by reducing for you your bitter enemies, the Saurometae, of whom I told him. But now you may wish to know the names and lineage of your visitor. Let me tell you. Here is the man to whom the others rallied from all parts of Hellas, Jason, son of Aeson, Cretheus' son. He must be a kinsman of our own on the father's side, if he is a grandson of Cretheus. But Cretheus and Athamas were both sons of Aeolus, and our father Phrixus was a son of Athamas. Next, and in case you have heard that, we have a son of Helios with us. Behold the man, Aegeus. This is Telamon, son of the illustrious Aeacus, a son of Zeus himself. Much the same is true of all the rest of Jason's followers. They are all the sons or grandsons of immortal gods. I'll pause here for a moment and have a quick swallow of water. And I guess since there aren't chapters, I'll do a little bit of thinking here. So, I've forgotten that this is going to be a sort of Greek epic in the sort of telling of it, so you have a lot of lineages and the setting up of things, and the gods interfering and doing their bit. But yeah, I've forgotten about that. But yeah, other than that, seems good enough. I like the description of the arrow hitting Medea. That's a striking one. But yeah, not too much else to say there, so press on. The king were filled with rage as he listened to Argus, and now, in a towering passion, he gave vent to his displeasure, the brunt of which fell on the sons of Chalciope, whom he held responsible for the presence of the rest. His eyes blazed with fury as he burst into speech. "You scoundrels, get out of my sight at once. Get out of my country, you and your knavish tricks, before you meet with a Phrixus and fleece you will not relish. It was no fleece that brought you and your confederates from Hellas, but a plot to seize my sceptre and my royal power. If you had not eaten at my table first, I would tear your tongues out and chop off your hands, both of them, and send you back with nothing but your feet to teach you to think twice before starting on another expedition. As for all of that about the blessed gods, it is nothing but a pack of lies." Telamon's gorge rose at this outburst from the angry king, and he were on the point of flinging back defiance to his own undoing, when he was checked by Jason, who forestalled him with a more politic reply. "My lord," he said, "pray overlook our show of arms. We have not come to your city and palace with any such designs as you suspect, nor have we predatory aims. Who of his own accord would brave so vast a sea to lay his hands on other people's goods? No. It was destiny, and the cruel orders of a brutal king that sent me here. Be generous to your suppliants, and I will make all Hellas ring with the glory of your name. And by way of more immediate recompense, we are prepared to take the field in your behalf against the Argonautica, or any other tribe you may wish to subdue." Jason's obsequious address had no effect. The king were plunged in sullen contention, wondering whether to leap up and kill them on the spot, or to put their powers to proof. He ended by deciding for a test and said to Jason, "Sir, there is no need for me to hear you out. If you are really children of the gods, or have other grounds for approaching me as equals in the course of your piratical adventure, I will let you have the golden fleece. That is, if you still want it when I have put you to the proof. For I am not like your overlord in Hellas, as you describe him. I am not inclined to be ungenerous to men of rank. I propose to test your courage and abilities by setting you a task which, though formidable, is not beyond the strength of my two hands. Grazing on the plains of Ares, I have a pair of bronze-footed and fire-breathing bulls. These I yoke and drive over the hard fallow of the plain, quickly powering a 4-acre field up to the ridge at either end. Then I sow the furrows, not with corn, but with the teeth of a monstrous serpent, which presently come up in the form of armoured men, whom I cut down and kill with my spear as they rise up against me on all sides. It is morning when I yoke my team, and by evening I have done my harvesting. That is what I do. If you, sir, can do as well, you may carry off the fleece to your king's palace on the very same day. If not, you shall not have it. Do not deceive yourself. It would be wrong for a brave man to truckle to a coward." Jason listened to this, with his eyes fixed on the floor. When the king had finished, he sat there in just as he was, without a word, resourceless in the face of his dilemma. For a long time he turned the matter over in his mind, unable boldly to accept a task so clearly fraught with peril. But at last he gave the king answer which he thought would serve. "Your Majesty, right is on your side, and you leave me no escape whatever. Therefore I will take up your challenge, in spite of its preposterous terms, and though I may be courting death. Men serve no harsher mistress than necessity, who drives me now and forces me to come here at another king's behest." He spoke in desperation, and were a little comforted by Aetes' sinister reply. "Go now and join your company. You have shown your relish for the task, but if you hesitate to yoke the bulls or shirk the deadly harvesting, I will take the matter up myself in a manner calculated to make others shrink from coming here and pestering their betters." He had made his meaning clear. and Jason rose from his chair. Augeas and Telamon followed him at once, and so did Argus, but without his brothers, whom he had warned by a nod to stay there for the time being. As the party went out of the hall, Jason's comeliness and charm singled him out from all the rest, and Medea, plucking her bright veil aside, turned wondering eyes upon him. Her heart smouldered with pain, and as he passed from sight, her soul crept out of her, as in a dream, flooded his steps. They left the palace with heavy hearts. Meanwhile, Chalciope, to save herself from Aeetes' wrath, had hastily withdrawn to her own room, together with her sons. Medea too retired, prayed all in quietude that love awakens. The old scene was still before her eyes, how Jason looked, the clothes he wore, the things he said, the way he sat and how he walked to the door. It seemed to her as she reviewed these images, there were nobody like Jason. His voice and the only sweet words that he had used still rang in her ears. But she feared for him. She was afraid that the bulls of Aeetes, with his own hands, might kill him, and she mourned him as one already dead. The pity of it overwhelmed her. A round tear ran down her cheek, and weeping quietly she voiced her woes. What is the meaning of this grief? Hero or villain, and why should I care which? The man is going to his death. Well, let him go. Yet I wish he had been spared. Yes, sovereign Lady Hecate, this is my prayer. Let him live to reach his home. But if he must be conquered by the bulls, may he first learn that I, for one, do not rejoice in his cruel fate. While Medea thus tormented herself, Jason were listening for some advice from Argus, but waited to address him till the people in their town were left behind. The party were retracing their steps across the plain. My lord, he said, I have a plan to suggest. You will not like it, but in that crisis no expedient should be left untried. You have heard me speak of a young woman who practices witchcraft under the tutelage of the goddess Hecate. If we could win her over, we might banish from our minds all fear of your defeat in that ordeal. I am only afraid that my mother may not support me in this scheme. Nevertheless, since we all stand to lose our lives together, I will go back and sound her. My friend, Jason said, responding to the goodwill shown by Argus, if you are satisfied, then I have no objections. Go back at once and seek your mother's aid, feeling your way with care. But how bleak the prospect is, with her one hope of seeing home again in a woman's hands. Soon after this they reached the marsh. Their comrades, when they saw them coming, greeted them with cheerful inquiries, which Jason answered in gloomy vein. Friends, he said, if I were to answer all your questions, we should never finish, but the cruel king has definitely set his face against us. He said he had a couple of bronze-footed and fire-breathing bulls grazing on the plain of Eros, and he told me to plough a 4-acre field with these. He will give me seed from a serpent's jaws, which will produce a crop of earth-born men in panoplies of bronze. And I have got to kill them before the day is done. That is my task. I straightway undertook it, for I had no choice. The task, as Jason described it, seemed so impossible to all of them, that for a while they stood there without a sound or word, looking at one another in impotent despair. But at last Peleus took his arm and spoke out to his fellow chieftains. The time has come. We must confer and settle what to do. Not that debate will help us much. I would rather trust to strength of arm, Jason, my lord. If you fancy the adventure would mean to yoke Aeetes' bulls, you will naturally keep your promise and prepare. But if you have the slightest fear that your nerves may fail you, do not force yourself. And you need not sit there looking round for someone else. I, for one, am willing. The worst that I shall suffer will be death. So said the son of Achaeus. Telamon too was stirred and eagerly leapt up. Next Ardus, full of lofty thoughts, and Castor, and Polydeuces, and with them one who already numbered with the men of might, though the down was scarcely showing on his cheeks. Medea, son of Oenus, his heart uplifted by the courage that dares all. But the others made no move, leaving it at ease, and Argus addressed the 6 devoted men. My friends, you certainly provide us with a last resource, but I have some hopes of timely help that may be coming from my mother. So I advise you, keep as you are, do as you did earlier and wait here in the ship for a little while. It is always better to think twice before one throws away one's life for nothing. There is a girl living in Aeetes' palace, whom the goddess Hecate has taught to handle with extraordinary skill all the magic herbs that grow on dry land or in running water. With these she can put out a raging fire, she can stop rivers as they roar in spate, arrest a star and check the movement of the sacred moon. We thought of her as we made our way down here from the palace. Oh, no worries at all, Wild. You stay safe, yeah? May the story that we tell on Zeus that he spares you the wrath of his storm. But if you must be gone, then go in peace and go with my blessing. You have my blessing for the day. Anyhow, yeah. We thought of her as we made our way down here from the palace. My mother, her own sister, might persuade her to be our ally in the hour of trial. And with your approval, I am prepared to go back to Aeetes' palace this very day and see what I can do. Who knows? Some friendly power may come to my assistance. So said Argus, and the gods was calmed. They sent them a sign. In her terror, a timid dove, hotly pursued by a great orc, dropped straight down into Jason's lap, while the orc fell impaled on the mascot at the stern. Mopsus at once made the omens clear to all. It is for you, my friends, that heaven has designed this portent. We could construe it in no better way than by approaching the girl with every plea we can devise. And I do not think she will refuse. If Aeneas was right when he told us that our safety lay in Aphrodite's care. But this gentle bird whose life was spared belongs to her. May all turn out as I foresee regarding the omens which my inward eye. And so, my friends, let us invoke Cytherea's aid and put ourselves at once in the hands of Argus. The young men applauded, remembering what Phineas had told them. But there was one dissenting voice, and that a loud one. Ardus leapt up in a towering rage and shouted, "For shame! Have we come here to trot along with women, calling out Aphrodite to support us instead of the mighty god of battle? Do you look to doves and hawks to get you out of trouble? Please yourselves. Forget that you are fighters. They court the girls and turn their silly hearts." This tirade from Ardus was received by many of his comrades with muttering and resentment, though no one took the floor to answer him back. He sat down in our dudgeon, and Jason rose immediately to give them his decision and his orders. "We are all agreed," he said. "Argus sets out from the ship, and we ourselves will now make fast with our oars from the river to the shore, where anyone can see us. We certainly ought not to hide here any longer, though we were afraid of fighting." With that, he dispatched Argus on his way back to the town, and the crew, taking their orders from Aeson's son, hauled the anchor stones on board and rowed Argus close to dry land, a little way from the marsh. At the same time, Aeetes, meaning to play the Medea false and do them grievous injury, summoned Colchians to assemble not in his palace, but at another spot where meetings had been held before. He declared that as soon as the bulls had destroyed the man who had taken up his formidable challenge, he would strip a forest hill of brushwood and burn the ship with every man on board, to cure them once for all of the intolerable airs they gave themselves, these enterprising buccaneers. It was true that he had welcomed Phrixus to his palace, but whatever the man's plight, he certainly would not have done so, though he had not known a foreigner so gentle and so well conducted, if Xuthus himself had not sent Hermes speeding down from heaven to see that he were met with a sympathetic host. Much less should pirates landed in his country be left unpunished, men whose sole concern it were to get their hands on other people's goods, to lie in ambush plotting a sudden stroke, to sally out, cry havoc, and raid the farmers' yards. Moreover, Phrixus' son should make him suitable amends for coming back in league with a gang of ruffians to hurl him from his throne. The crazy fools. But it all chimed in with an ugly hint he had long ago from his father, Helios, warning him to beware of treasonable plots and evil machinations in his own family. So, to complete their chastisement, he would pack them off to Achaea, just as they and their father had wished. And that was surely far enough. As for his daughters, he had not the slightest fear of treachery from them, nor from his son Aspaeus. Only Chalciope's sons were involved in the mischief. The angry king ended by informing his people of the drastic measure he had in mind, and ordering them with many threats to watch the ship and the men themselves, so that no one should escape his doom. By now, Argus had reached the palace and were urging his mother with every argument at his command to invoke Medea's aid. The same idea had already occurred to Chalciope herself, and she had hesitated. On the one hand, she was afraid of failure. Medea might be so appalled by thoughts of her father's wrath that all entreaties would fall upon deaf ears. On the other, she feared that her sister yielded to her players, the old conspiracy would be laid bare. Meanwhile, the maiden lay on her bed fast asleep, with all her cares forgotten. But not for long. Dreams assailed her, beautiful, though deceitful dreams, the nightmares of a soul in pain. She dreamt that the stranger had accepted the challenge, not in the hope of winning the ram's fleece. It was not that had brought him to Aea, but in order that he might carry her off to his home as his bride. Then it seemed that it was she who was standing up to the bulls. She found it easy to handle them. When all were done, her parents backed out of the bargain, pointing out that it was Jason, not their daughter, whom they had dared to yoke to bulls. This led to an interminable dispute between her father and the Argonauts, which resulted in their leaving the decision to her. She could do as she pleased. And she, without a moment's thought, turned her back on her parents and chose the stranger. Her parents were cut on the quick. They screamed in their anger, and with their cries she woke. She sat up, shivering with fright, peered round the walls of her bedroom. Slowly and painfully she dragged herself back to reality. Then in self-pity she cried out and voiced the terror that the nightmare had engendered. "These noblemen, they're coming here. I fear it spells catastrophe. And how I tremble for their leader. He should pay court to some Achaean girl far away in his own country, leaving me content with spinsterhood and home. And no, away with modesty. I will stand aside no longer. I will go to my sister. She is anxious for her sons, and one might ask me to help in the ordeal, and so my heartache would be eased." With that she rose, and in her gown, with nothing on her feet, went to her bedroom door and opened it. She resolved to go to her sister, and she crossed the threshold. Once outside, she stayed for a long time where she was, inhibited by shame. Then she turned and went back into the room. Again she came out of it, and again she crept back, borne to and fro on hesitating feet. Whenever she set out, shame held her back, and all the time shame held her in the room. Shameless desire kept urging her to leave. 3 times she tried to go, 3 times she failed. At the 4th attempt she threw herself face downward on the bed and writhed in pain. Her plight was like that of a bride's mourning in her bedroom, with a young husband chosen for her by her brothers and parents, and lost by some stroke of fate before the pair had enjoyed each other's love. Too shy and circumspect as yet to mingle freely with the maids and risk an unkind word or tactless jar, she sits disconsolate in a corner of the room, looks at the empty bed, weeps in silence, though her heart is bursting. Thus Medea wept. But presently one of the servants, her own young maid, came into the room, and seeing her mistress lying there, in tears, ran off to tell Chalciope, and was sitting with her sons considering how they might win Medea over. Chalciope did not make light of the girl's story, strange as it seemed. In great alarm she hurried through the house from her own to her sister's room, and there she found her lying in misery on the bed, both cheeks torn and her eyes red with weeping. "My dear," she cried, "what is the meaning of these tears? What has made you so terribly unhappy? Have you suddenly been taken ill, or has father told you some awful fate he has in mind for me and my sons? Oh, how I wish I might never see this city and this home of ours again, and live at the world's end where nobody has even heard of the Colchians." Medea blushed. She was eager to answer, but for a long while was checked by maiden modesty. Time and again the truth were on the tip of her tongue, only to be swallowed back. Time and again it tried to force a passage through her lovely lips, but no words come. At last, impelled by the bold hand alone, she gave her sister a disingenuous reply. "Chalciope, I am terrified for your sons. I am afraid that father will destroy them out of hand, strangers and all. I had a little sleep just now, and in a nightmare that is what I saw. God forfend such evil. May you never have to suffer so through them." Medea was trying to induce her sister to make the first move, and appeal to her to save her sons. And indeed, Chalciope were overwhelmed by horror at her disclosure. She said, "My fears have been the same as yours. That is what brought me here. I hope that you and I might put our heads together and find a way of rescuing my sons. But swear by earth and heaven that you will keep what I say to yourself. and work in league with me. I implore you by the happy gods, by your own head and by your parents, not to stand by while they are mercilessly done to death. If you do so, may I die with my dear sons and haunt you afterwards from Hades like an avenging fury." With that she burst into tears, sank down and throwing her arms around her sister's knees, buried her head in her lap. Each of them wailed in pity for the other, and faint sounds of women weeping in distress was heard throughout the palace. Medea was the first to speak. "Sister," she said, "you left me speechless when you talked of curses and avenging furies. How can I set your mind at rest? I only wish we could be sure of rescuing your sons. However, I will do as you ask, and take the solemn oath of the Colchian, swearing by mighty heaven and earth below, the mother of the gods, that provided your demands are not impossible, I will help you as you wish with all the power that in me lies." Medea had taken the oath, Chalciope said, "Well now, for the sake of my sons, could you not devise some stratagem, some cunning ruse that the strangers could rely on in this trial? He needs you just as much as they do. In fact, he has sent Argus here towards me to enlist your help. I left him in the palace when I came to you just now." And we'll pause here for a moment, because the ad is about to come on. I'm going to mute myself for a moment because I need to blow my nose, and I think it would sound quite disgusting. And the ads is on, and we're unmuted, and I shall have my customary drink of water. So there we are. You've had described for us the famous trial that Jason undertakes in order to earn the fleece from wicked King Aetus. And we have the enlistment of Medea, who has been struck by the arrow of Eros, who is, I believe, the inspiration for Cupid in sort of more modern folk tales, and has fallen in love with him, and is so torn that she wished to help him herself, but now with the aid of her sister's urging, whose sons are also at risk by their companionship with Jason, she is liable to, I suppose. I was about to say she intends, but we haven't actually seen her intentions. She's only just been asked to do it. But what else is there to say on the matter? These are some comments I want to make on the gods and goddesses. So there's some odd transcriptions here of the names. We've got Hera instead of Hera, and Aphrodite is half the time referred to by an epithet, which I'm not super familiar with it. Where is it? Is it Cyprus? I think Cyprus is the epithet. But yeah, I know that the gods are often. A lot of the Greek gods had epithets they went by. Yeah, Cyprus, that's it. And that they were referred to by. And in referring to them by their epithets, they were referring to a specific aspect of them. Oh god. I used to know some of them, but I don't really recall any of them, particularly off the top of my head. Lamp, you remember any of them? Lampa said that Hermes was sometimes referred to as Trismegistus, as means twice majestic, although I've got no idea what specific aspect of it that is meant to refer to. Apolloparthos? Yeah. Apolloparthos, the foreseeing Apollo, so that's Apollo in his guise as the prophet. So you call on him as Parthos when you were seeking his gift of prophecy specifically, as opposed to his skills with archery or his symbolism of the sun or whatever. There's a few others like that, but like I said, I don't remember many. I'm not exactly sure about Cypria. I think it is to do with her aspect of the bond to love, but I'm not entirely. I wouldn't swear to that. At any rate, ads about to end, so I'll have another swallow of water. And the ad should be over, and we should be back. So, pressing directly onwards. At this, Medea's heart leapt up. Her lovely cheeks were crimson, and her eyes grew dim with tears of joy. "Chalciope," she cried, I will do anything to please you and your sons, anything to make you happy. May I never see the light of dawn again, and may you see me in the world no more. If I put anything before your safety and the lives of your sons, who are my brothers, my dear kinsmen with whom I was brought up. And you, am I not as much your daughter as your sister, that you that took me to your breast, as you did then when I was a baby, as I often heard my mother say? But go now and tell no one of my promise, so that my parents may not know I propose to keep it. At dawn I will go to Hecate's temple with magic medicine for the bulls. Thus assured, Chalciope withdrew from her sister's room, and brought her sons the news of her success. But Medea, left alone, fell prey once more to shame and horror at the way in which she planned to help a man in defiance of her father's wishes. Not threw her shadow on the world. Sailors out at sea looked out at the circling bear and stars of Orion. Travellers and watchmen longed for sleep, and oblivion came at last, the mothers mourning for their children's death. In the town, dogs ceased to bark and meant to call to one another. Silence reigned over the deepening dark. But gentle sleep did not visit Medea. In her yearning for Jason, fretful cares kept her awake. She feared the great strength of the bulls. She saw him face them in the field of Ares. She saw him meet an ignominious end. Her heart floated within her, restless as a patch of sunlight dancing up and down on the wall as the swirling water poured into a pale reflective. Tears of pity ran down her cheeks, and her whole body was possessed by agony, the searing pain which shot along her nerves and deep into the nape of her neck, that vulnerable spot where the relentless archery of love causes the keenest pains. At one moment she thought she would give him the magic drug for the bulls, but the next she thought no, she would rather die herself. And then that she would do neither, patiently endure her fate. In the end she sat down and debated with herself in miserable indecision. Thank you for the hydrate, Abby. Thank you for the stretch. I'll start with the stretch, I suppose. Yeah. Ooh. So I'll crack the neck first. Ooh. There was an alright one there, I don't know if that picked up. And then we stand and do the back. My back never really cracks. On account of my fine and curvaceous spine that keeps me in good and limber shape. Look at the natural curve of that SkitterSkreetch spine. And I thank you for the hydrate. I'll drink again to your health. Nostrovia. Thank you kindly for that. I do appreciate you looking out for me. And with that, we press onward. In the end she sat down and debated us with herself in miserable indecision. Evil on this side, evil on that, and I must choose between them. In either case my plight is desperate and there is no escape. This torture will go on. Oh, how I wish that Artemis with her swift darts had put an end to me before I had seen that man, before Chalciope's sons had gone to Achaia. Some god, some fury rather, must have brought them back with grief and tears for us. Let him be killed in the struggle, if it is indeed his fate to perish in the unploughable field. But how could I prepare the drug without my parents' knowledge? What story shall I tell them? What trickery will I serve? How can I help him and fail to be found out? Are he and I to meet alone? Indeed, I am ill-starred, for even if he dies, I have no hope of happiness. With Jason dead, I should taste real misery. Away with modesty, farewell to my good name. Saved from all harm by me, let him go where he pleases, and let me die. On the very day of his success, I could hang myself from a rafter and take a deadly poison. Yet even so, my death would never save me from their wicked tongues. My fate would be the talk of every city in the world. And here the Colchian women would bandy my name about and drag it not. The girl who fancied a foreigner enough to die for him, disgraced her parents and her home. Went off her head for love, while infamy would not be mine. Ah, how I grieve now for the folly of my passion. Better to die here in my room this very night, passing from life unnoticed, unreproached, than to carry through this horrible, this despicable scheme. With that, she went and fetched the box in which she kept her many drugs, healing or deadly, and putting it on her knees she wept. Tears ran unchecked in torrents down her cheeks, and drenched her laps as she bemoaned her own sad destiny. She was determined now to take a poison from the box and swallow it, and in a moment she was fumbling with the fastening of the lid in her unhappy eagerness to reach the fatal drug. But suddenly she was overcome by the hateful thought of death, and for a long time she stayed her hand in silent horror. Visions of life and all its fascinating cares rose up before her. She thought of the pleasures that living could enjoy. She thought of her happy playmates as a young girl will. And now, setting its true value on all this, it seemed to her a sweeter thing to see the sun than it had ever been before. So, prompted by Eros, she changed her mind and put the box away. Irresolute no longer, she waited eagerly for dawn to come, so that she could meet the stranger face to face and give him the magic drug as she had promised. Time after time she opened her door to catch the first glimmer of the day. She rejoiced when early dawn lit up the sky. People in the town began to stir. Argus left the palace and returned to the ship. But he told his brothers to wait before following him, in order to find out what Medea meant to do. She herself, as soon as she saw the first light of day, gathered up the golden locks that were floating round her shoulders in disorder, washed the stains from her cheeks, and cleansed her skin with an ointment clear as nectar. Then she put on a beautiful robe, equipped with cunning brooches, and threw a silvery veil over her lovely head. And as she moved about, there in her own home, she walked oblivious of all evils imminent and worse to come. She had 12 maids, young as herself, and all unmarried, who slept in the antechamber of her own sweet-scented rooms. She called them now and told them to yoke the mules to her carriage at once, as she wished to drive to the splendid temple of Hecate. And while they were getting the carriage ready, she took a magic ointment from her box. The salve was named after Prometheus. The man had only to smear it on his body after propitiating the only begotten maiden with a midnight offering, to become invulnerable by sword or fire for that day, to surpass himself in strength and daring. It first appeared in a plant that sprung from the blood-like ichor of Prometheus in his torment, which the flesh-eating eagle had dropped on the spurs of the Caucasus. The flower, which grew on twin stalks a cubit high, with the colour of Corsian saffron, while the roots looked like flesh that had just been cut, and the juice like the dark sap of mountain oak. To make the ointment, Medea, clothed in black in the gloom of night, had drawn this juice in Caspian shell after bathing in 7 perennial streams, and calling 7 times on Bremos, Nertha Use, Bremos Night Wanderer of the underworld, Queen of the Dead. The dark earth shook and rumbled underneath the Titan root when it would come, and Prometheus himself groaned in the anguish of his soul. Such was the salve that Medea chose. Placing it in the fragrant girdle that she wore beneath her bosom, she left the house and got into her carriage, with 2 maids on either side. They gave her the reins, and taking the well-made whip in her right hand, she drove off through the town, while the rest of the maids tucked up their skirts above their white knees and ran beyond along the broad highway, holding the wicker body of the carriage. I'm just going to pause for a moment here to say, I do love it when a story includes a recipe, you know? I mean, look, it gives you all the step-by-step instructions to make it yourself. The description of the flower so you can find it, where it grows, and all the preparatory steps you need to make it, and how the Titan Prometheus himself would tremble into the agony in his soul. So there's a little bit of homework for you SkitterSkreetch fans, since this is supposed to be a lesson. Go and make this magic ointment if you can. I challenge any of you. Yeah, pressing on. So let me have a swallow of water before, because I've paused. I should do it when I get a chance. Holding on to the wicker body of the carriage. I see her there like Artemis, standing in her golden chariot after she has bathed in the gentle waters of Parthenius, or the streams of Amnisus, and driving off with her fast-trotting deer over the hills far away to some rich-scented sacrifice. Attendant nymphs have gathered at the source of Amnisus, or flocked in from the glens and upland springs to follow her, and fawning beasts whimper in homage and tremble as she passes by. Us Medea and her maids sped through the town, Neither side people made way for her, avoiding the princess's eye. Leaving the city in its well-paved streets, she drove across the plain and drew up the shrine. And she got quite quickly down from her smooth-running carriage and addressed her maids. "My friends," she said, "I have done wrong. I forgot that we were told not to go among these foreigners who are wandering about the place. Everybody in the town is terrified, and in consequence none of the women who every day foregather here have come. But since we are here and it looks as though we should be left in peace, we need not deny ourselves a little pleasure. Let us sing to our heart's content, and then, when we have gathered some of the lovely flowers in the meadow there, go back to town at the usual time. And if you'll only fall in with the scheme of mine, you shall have something better than flowers to take home with you today. I will explain. Argus and Chalciope herself has persuaded me against my better judgment, but not a word to anyone of what I say. My father must not hear about it. They wish me to protect the stranger, the one who took up the challenge in his mortal combat with the bulls, and take some presents from him in return. I told them I thought well of the idea, and I have in fact invited him to come and see me here without his followers. But if he brings his gifts and hands them over, I mean to share them out among ourselves, and what we give him in return will be a deadlier drug than he expects. All I ask of you when he arrives is to leave me by myself." With this ingenious figment, Medea satisfied her maids. Meanwhile Argus, when his brothers had told him she was going to the temple of Hecate at dawn, drew Jason apart and conducted him across the plain. Mopsus, Sylvampicus, went with him, an excellent advisor for travellers setting out, and able to interpret any omens that a bird might offer on the way. As for Jason, by the grace of Eros, queen of heaven, no hero of the past, no son of Zeus himself, no offspring of the other gods could have outshone him on that day. He was so good to look at, so delightful to talk to. Even his companions, as they glanced at him, were fascinated by his radiant charm. For Mopsus it were a pleasurable journey. He had a shrewd idea how it would end. Near the shrine and beside the path they followed, there stood a poplar, flaunting its myriad leaves. It was much frequented as a roost by garrulous crows, one of which, flapping its wings as they was passing by and cawing from the tree trunk, expressed the sentiments of Eros. "Who in this inglorious seer who has not had the sense to realize, what even children know, that a girl does not permit herself to say a single word of love to a young man who brings an escort with him? Off with you, foolish prophets and incompetent diviner! You certainly are not inspired by Cypris or the gentle Loves." Mopsus listened to the bird's remark with a smile at the reprimand from heaven. Turning to Jason, he said, "Proceed, my lord, to the temple, where you will find Medea and to be graciously received. Thanks to Aphrodite, will be your ally in the hour of the trial, as was foretold to us by Phineus, son of Agenor. We too, Argus and I, will not go any nearer, and will wait here till you come back. You must go to her alone, and attach her to yourself by your own persuasive eloquence." This was sound advice, and they both accepted it at once. Meanwhile Medea, though she was singing and dancing with her maids, could think of one thing only. There was no melody, however gay, that did not quickly cease to please. Time and again she faltered and come to an halt. To keep her eyes fixed on her choir were more than she could do. She was forever turning them aside to search the distant paths, and more than once she well nigh fainted when she mistook the noise of the wind for the footfall of a passer-by. But it was not so very long before the sight of Jason rewarded her impatient watch. Like Sirius rising from the ocean, brilliant and beautiful, but full of menace for the flocks, he sprang into view, splendid to look at, but fraught with trouble for the lovesick girl. Her heart stood still, a mist descended on her eyes, a warm flush spread across her cheeks. She could neither move towards him nor retreat, for her feet were rooted in the ground. And now her servants disappeared, and the pair of them stood face to face without a word or sound, like oaks or tall pines that stand in the mountains side by side in silence, and the air is still, and the wind has stirred them by chatter without end. So these two, stirred by the breath of love, were soon to pour out all their tale. Jason, seeing how distraught Medea were, tried to put her at ease. "Lady," he said, "I am alone. Why are you so fearful of me? I am not a profligate, as some men are, and ne'er was, even in my own country. So you have no need to be on your guard. When they ask or tell me anything you wish. We have come together here as friends in a consecrated spot, which must not be profane. Speak to me, question me without reserve, and since you have already promised your sister to give me the talisman I need so much, pray do not put me off with pleasant speeches. I plead to you by Hecate herself, by your parents and by Zeus. His hand protects all suppliants and strangers, and I that now address my prayers to you in my necessity are both a stranger and a suppliant. Without you and your sister I shall never succeed in my appalling task. Grant me your aid, and in the days to come I will reward you duly, repaying you as best I can from the distant land when I shall sing your praises. My comrades too, when they are back in Helios, will immortalise your name. So will their wives and mothers, whom I think of now sitting by the sea, shedding tears in their anxiety for us, bitter tears which you could wipe away. Remember Adriane, the young Ariadne, daughter of Minos and Pasiphae, who were daughter of the sun. She did not scruple to befriend Theseus and save him in his hour of trial, and then when Minos had relented, she left her home and sailed away with him. She was the darling of the gods, and she has her emblem in the sky all night. A ring of stars called Ariadne's crown rolls on its way among the heavenly constellations. You too will be thanked by the gods if you save me and all my noble friends. Indeed, your loveliness assures me of a kind and tender heart within. Jason's homage melted Medea. Turning her eyes aside, she smiled divinely, and then, uplifted by his praise, she looked him in the face. How to begin she did not know. She longed so much to tell him everything at once. With a charm, she did not hesitate. She drew it out from her sweet-scented girdle, and she took it in his hands. She took it in his hands with joy. She revelled in his need of her, and would have poured out all her soul to him as well, so captivating with the light of love that streamed from Jason's golden neck, and held her gleaming eyes. Her heart warmed and melted like the dew on roses under the morning sun. At one moment, both of them were staring at the ground, with deep embarrassment. At the next, they were smiling and glancing at each other with the love light in their eyes. But at last, Medea forced herself to speak to him. "Hear me now," she said. "These are my plans for you. When you have met my father and he has given you the deadly teeth from the serpent's jaw, wait for the moment of midnight, and after bathing in an ever-running river, go out alone in sombre clothes and dig a round pit in the earth. There kill a ewe, and after heaping up a pyre of the pit, sacrifice it whole with a libation of honey from the hive, and prayers to Hecate, Perseus' only daughter. Then when you have invoked the goddess duly, withdraw from the pyre, and do not be tempted to look behind you as you go, either by footfalls or the baying of hounds, or you will ruin everything, and never reach your friends alive. In the morning, melt this charm, strip, and using it like oil, anoint your body. It will endow you with tremendous strength and boundless confidence. You will feel yourself a match not for mere men, but for the gods themselves. Sprinkle your spear and shield and sword with it as well, and neither the spear points of the earthborn men nor the consuming flames of the savage bulls beyond will find you vulnerable. But you will not be immune for long, only for the day. Nevertheless, do not at any moment flinch from the encounter. And here is something else that will stand you in good stead. You have yoked the mighty bulls, you have ploughed the stubborn fallow, with those great hands and all that strength, it will not take you long. You have sown the serpent's teeth in the dark earth, and now the plant giants are springing up among the furrows. Watch till you see a number of them rise from the soil, then, before they see you, throw a great boulder in among them, and they will fall on it like famished dogs, and kill one another. That is your moment. Plunge into the fray yourself. And so the task is done, and you can carry off the fleece to Hellas. A long, long way from Aea, I believe. Go nonetheless. Go where you will. Go where the fancy takes you when you part from us. After this, Medea was silent for a while. She kept her eyes fixed on the ground, and the warm tears ran down her lovely cheeks as she saw him sailing off over the Arse seas, far away from her. Then she looked up at him, and sorrowfully spoke again, taking his right hand in hers and no longer attempting to conceal her love. She said, "But do remember, if you ever reach your home, remember the name of Medea, and I, for my part, will remember you when you are far away. But now, pray tell me where you live. Where are you bound for when you sail across the sea from here? Will your journey take you near the wealthy city of Orchomenus, or the Isle of Aea? Tell me too about that girl you mentioned, who won such fame for herself, the daughter of Pasiphae, my father's sister. As he listened to this and noted her tears, unconscionable love stole into the heart of Jason too. He replied, "Of one thing I am sure, if I escape and live to reach Achaea, if Aeetes does not set us still with a more formidable task, ne'er by night or day shall I forget you. But you asked about the country of my birth. If it pleases you to hear, I will describe it. Indeed, I should like nothing better. It is a land ringed by lofty mountains, rich in sheep and pasture, and the birthplace of Prometheus' son, the good Deucalion, were the first man that found cities, built temples to the gods, and ruled mankind as king. Its neighbours call the land Haemonia, and in it stands Iolcus, my own town, and many others too, but the very name of the Aeaean island is unknown. Yet they do say that it will war from those parts, that the Aeoliad Menias migrated long ago and found Orchomenus, which borders on Comedian lands. Why do I trouble you with all this tiresome talk about my own and Minos' daughter, the far-famed Ariadne, that lovely lady with a glorious name, and roused your curiosity? I can only hope that, as Minos come to term with Theseus for her sake, your father will be reconciled with us." He had thought, by talking in this gentle way, to soothe Medea, but she were now obsessed by the gloomiest forebodings, embittered too, and she answered him with a passion. "No doubt in Hellas people think it right to honour their agreements, but Aeetes is not the kind of man that Minos was, and what you say of him is true. And as for Ariadne, I cannot claim to be a match for her, so do not talk of friendliness to strangers. But oh, at least remember me when you are back in Iolcus, and I, despite my parents, will remember you. And may there come to me some whisper from afar, some birds to tell my tale when you forget me. Or may the storm wind snatch me up and carry me across the sea to Iolcus, to denounce you to your face and remind you that I saved your life. That is the moment I would choose to pay an unexpected visit to your house." As she spoke, tears of misery ran down her cheeks. But Jason said, "Dear lady, you may spare the wandering winds their task, and your telltale birds as well. You are talking nonsense. If you come to us in Hellas, you will be honoured and revered by both the women and the men. Indeed, they will treat you as a goddess, because it was through you that their sons came home alive. All their brothers, kinsmen, or beloved husbands were saved from harm. And there shall be a bridal bed for you, which you and I will share. Nothing shall part us in our love, till death at his appointed hour removes us from the light of day." As she heard these words of his, her heart melted within her, and yet she shuddered as she thought of this disastrous step she were about to take. Poor girl, she was not going to refuse for long this offer of a home in Hellas. The goddess Hera had arranged it all. Medea were to leave her native land for the sacred city of Iolcus, and there to bring his punishment to Peleus. Her maids, who had been spying on them from far, were now becoming restive, though they did not intervene. It was hard time for the maiden to go home to her mother, but Medea had no thought of leaving yet. She was entranced both by his comeliness and his bewitching talk. At last, however, Jason, who had kept his wits about him, said, "Now we must part, or the sun will set before we know it. Besides, some passerby might see us. We will meet each other here again." By gentle steps they had advanced so far towards an understanding. Now they parted, he in a joyful mood to go back to his companions in the ship, she to rejoin her maids, who all ran up to meet her. As they gathered round, she did not even notice them. Her head was in the clouds. Without knowing what she did, she got into her carriage to drive the mules, taking the reins in one hand and the whip in the other, and off they trotted to the palace in the town. I paused here to have a quick drink. She had no sooner arrived than Chalciope questioned her anxiously about her sons. But Medea had left her wits behind her. She neither heard a word her sister said, nor showed the least desire to answer her inquiries. She sat down on a low stool at the foot of her bed, leant over and rested her cheek on her left hand, pondering with tears in her eyes at the infamous part she had played in a scheme that she herself had staged. Jason found his escort in the place where he had left them, and as they set out to rejoin the rest, he told them how he had fared. When the party reached the ship, he was received with open arms, and in reply to their questions of his friends, he told them of Medea's plans, and so showed them the powerful charm. Ardas was the only member of the company who were not impressed. He sat aloof, nursing his resentment. The rest was overjoyed, and since the night permitted no immediate move, they settled down in peace and comfort. But at dawn they dispatched 2 men to Aeetes to ask him for the seed. Telamon, beloved of Ares, and Ethalides, the famous son of Hermes. This pair set out on their errand, and they did not fail. When they reached the king, he handed them the deadly teeth that Jason would have sown. The teeth were those of the Aeonian serpent, the guardian of Ares' spring, which Cadmus killed in Augean Thebes. He had come there in search for Europa, and there he settled under the guidance of an effort picked out for him by Apollo in an oracle. Athena, Lady Atrato, tore the teeth out of the serpent's jaws and divided them between Aeetes and Cadmus, the slayer of the beast. Cadmus sowed them in the Ionian plain, and found an earthborn clan with all that had escaped the spear of Ares when he did his harvesting. Such were the teeth that Aeetes let them take back to that ship. He gave them willingly, as he was satisfied that Jason, even if he yoked the bulls, would prove unable to finish off the task. It were evening. Out in the west, beyond the farthest Ethiopian hills, the sun was sinking under the darkening world. Night were harnessing her team, and the Argonauts were preparing their beds by the ulsters of the ship. But Jason waited for the bright constellation of the Bear to decline, and then, when all the air from heaven to earth was still, he set out like a stealthy thief across the solitary plain. During the day he prepared himself, and so had everything he needed with him. Argus had fetched him some milk and an ewe from a farm. The rest he had taken from the ship itself. When he had found an unfrequented spot in a clear meadow under an open sky, he began by bathing his naked body reverentially in the sacred river, and then put on a dark mantle, which Arpsipsel of Lemnos had given him to remind him of their passionate embraces. Then he dug a pit a cubit deep, piled up billets, and laid the sheep on top of them after cutting its throat. He kindled the wood from underneath, and poured mingled libations on the sacrifice, calling on Hecate Brimo to help him in the coming test. This done, he withdrew, and the dread goddess, hearing his words from the abyss, came up to accept the offering of Aeson's son. She was garlanded by fearsome snakes that coiled themselves round twigs of oak. The twinkle of 1,000 torches lit the scene, and hounds of the underworld barked shrilly all around her. The old meadow trembled under her feet, and the nymphs of marsh and river, who haunt the fens by Amaranthian faces, cried out in fear. Jason was terrified, but even so, as he retreated, he did not once turn round. And so he found himself among his friends once more, and dawn arrived, showing herself betimes above the snows of Caucasus. At daybreak too, Aeetes put on his breast the stuffed cuirass which Ares had given him after slaying Mimas with his own hands in the field of Phlegra. And on his head he set his golden helmet, with 4 plates, bright as the sun's round face when he rises fresh from the ocean stream. He took up his shield of many irons, and his unconquerable spear, a spear that none of the Argonauts could have withstood, now that they had deserted Heracles, who alone could have dealt with it in battle. Phaethon, who was close at hand, holding his father's swift horses, and well-built chariot in readiness. Aeetes mounted, took the reins in his hand, and drove out of the town along the broad highway to attend the contest, followed by hurrying crowds. Lord of the Colchians he might have been, beside in his chariot driving the Isthmian games, the Tenarium of the waters of Lela, or through the grove of Onchestus, and on the Caluria with his steeds, to the Haemonian rock or the woods of Gerestus. Meanwhile Jason, remembering Medea's instructions, melted the magic drug, and sprinkled his shield with it, and his sturdy spear and sword. His comrades watched him and put his weapons to the proof with all the force they had. But they could not bend the spear at all. Even in their strong hands it proved itself unbreakable. Ardas were furious with them. He hacked at the butt end of the spear with his great sword, but the blade rebounded from it like an hammer from the anvil. A great shout of joy went up. They felt the battle were already won. Next, Jason sprinkled his own body and were imbued with a miraculous, indomitable might. As his hands increased in power, his very fingers twitched, like a war horse eager for battle, pawing the ground, neighing, pricking its ears and tossing up his head in pride. He exulted in the strength of his limbs. Time and again he leapt high in the air, this way and that, brandishing his shield of bronze and ashen spear. The weapons flashed in the air like intermittent lightning playing in a stormy sky from black clouds charged with rain. After that there were no faltering. The Argonauts were ready for the test. They took their places on the benches of the ship and rowed her swiftly upstream, to the plain of Ares. This lay as far beyond the city as a chariot has to travel from the start to the turning post, where the kinsmen of a dead king are holding foot, and chariot races in his honour. They found the Aetes there, and a full gathering of the Colchians. The tribesmen were stationed on their rocky spurs of Caucasus, and the king were wheeling around in his chariot on the riverbank. Jason, as soon as his men had made the oars fast, leapt from the ship and entered the lists with spear and shield. He also took with him a shining bronze helmet full of sharp teeth, and his sword was slung from his shoulder, but his body was bare, so that he looked like Apollo with a golden sword, as much as Ares, god of war. Glancing round the shield, he saw the bronze yoke for the bulls, and beside it the plough of indurated steel, all in one piece. He went up with them, planted his heavy spear in the ground butt to butt, and laid the helmet down, leaning against the spear. Then he went forward with his shield alone to examine the countless tracks that the bulls had made. And now, from somewhere in the bowels of the earth, from the smoky stronghold where they slept, the pair of bulls appeared, breathing flames of fire. The Argonauts was terrified at the sight, but Jason, planting his feet apart, stood to receive them, as a reef in the sea confronts the tossing billows in a gale. He held the shield in front of him, and the two bulls, bellowing loudly, charged and butted it with their strong horns. He would not shift from his stance, not by so much as an inch. The bulls snorted and spurned from their mouths devouring flames, like a perforated crucible, and the leather bellows of the smith, sometimes creasing, sometimes low and hard, have made a blaze, and the fire leaps up from below with a terrific roar. The deadly assailed them on all sides with the force of lightning, but were protected by Medea's magic. Seizing the right-hand bull by the tip of its horn, he dragged it with all his might towards the yoke, and then brought it down on its knees with a sudden kick on its bronze foot. The other charged and were felled in the same way at a single blow, and Jason, who had cast his shield aside, stood with his feet apart, and though the flames at once enveloped him, held them both down for their foreknees where they fell. Aetes marvelled at the man's strength. Castor and Polydeuces picked up the yoke and gave it to Jason. They had been detailed for the task and were close at hand. Jason bound it tightly on the bulls' necks, lifted the bronze pole between them and fastened it to the yoke by its pointed end, while the twins backed out of the heat and returned to the ship. Then, taking his shield from the ground, he slung it upon his back, picked up the heavy helmet full of teeth and grasped his unconquerable spear, with which, like some ploughman using his Pelstian rod, I'm familiar with that word. Using his Pelstian goad, he pricked the bulls with under their flanks, with a firm grip on his well-made handle, guided the adamantine plough. At first the bulls in their half fury spurted flames of fire. Their breath come out with a roar like that of the blustering wind that causes frightened mariners to take in sail. But presently, admonished by the spear, they went ahead, and the rough fallow cleft by their own, and the great ploughman's mark lay broken up behind them. The huge clods as they was torn away along the furrow groaned aloud, and Jason come behind, planting his feet down firmly on the field. As he ploughed, he sowed the teeth, casting them far from himself, with many a backward glance, lest the deadly crop of earthborn men should catch him unawares. And the bulls, thrusting their bronze hooves in the earth, toiled on till only a third of the passing day were left. Then, when weary labourers in other fields was hoping it would be soon time to free their oxen from the yoke, This indefatigable ploughman's work was done. The old 4-acre field was ploughed. Jason freed his bulls from the plough and shooed them off. They fled across the plain, and he, seeing that no earthborn men had yet appeared in the furrows, seized the occasion to go back to the ship, where his comrades gathered round him with heartening words. He dipped his helmet in the flowing river, and with its water quenched his thirst. Then flexed his knees to keep them supple, and as fresh courage filled his heart, he lashed himself into a fury like a wild boar when it whets its teeth to face the hunt, and the foam drips to the ground from its savage mouth. By now, the earthborn men were shooting up like corn in all parts of the field. The deadly war god's sacred plot bristled with stout shields, double-pointed spears, and glittering helmets. The splendour of it flashed through the air above and struck Olympus. Indeed, this army springing from the earth shone out like the full congregation of the stars piercing the darkness of a murky night, when snow lies deep and the winds have chased the wintry clouds away. But Jason did not forget the counsel he had had from Medea of the many wiles. He picked up from the field a huge brown boulder, a formidable quoit that Ares might have thrown, but 4 strong men together could not have budged from its place. Rushing forward with this in his hands, he held it far away among the earthborn men, and crouched behind his shield unseen and full of confidence. The Colchians gave a mighty shout, like the roar of the sea beating on jagged rocks, and the king himself were astounded as he saw the great quoit hurl through the air. But the earthborn men, like nimble hounds, leapt on one another, with loud yells began to slay. Beneath each other's spears they fell on their mother earth, as pines or oaks are blown down by a gale. And now, like a bright meteor that leaps from heaven and leaves a fiery trail behind it, portentous to all those who see it flash across the night, the son of Aeson hurled himself on them with his sword unsheathed, and in promiscuous slaughter mowed them down, striking as he could, but many of them had but half emerged and showed their flanks and bellies only. Some had their shoulders clear, some had just stood up, and others were afoot already and rushing into battle. So might some farmer threatened by a frontier war snatch up a newly sharpened sickle and, lest the enemy should reap his fields before him, hasten to cut down the unripe corn, not waiting for the season and the sun to ripen it. Thus Jason cut his crop of earthborn men. Blood filled the furrows as water fills the conduits of a spring. And still they fell, some on their faces biting the rough clods, some on their backs and others on their hands and sides, looking like monsters from the sea. Many were struck before they could lift up their feet, and rested there with the death dew on their brows, each trailing on the earth so much of him as had come up in the light of day. They lay like saplings in an orchard bowed to the ground when Zeus had sent torrential rains and snapped them at the root, washing the gardener's toil and bringing heartbreak to the owner of the plot, the man who had planted them. Such were the sing that King Aeetes now surveyed, and such his bitterness. He went back to the city with his Colchians, pondering on the quickest way to bring the foreigners to book. And the sun sank, and Jason's task was done. And that is the end of the extract we have today. Again, I suspect this text to be an extract of the longer text called the Argonautica, but this is just a small part of it. And that's all we've got for us. So, let me head back to my own chamber, and we shall have a little bit of discussion on that before we call it for the night. But first, let me have a drink of water, because the manner in which I was reading that were a little bit rough in the old front. So then, what is there to say on this text? Well, obviously, it's probably the most famous part of the Argonautica, the winning of the Golden Fleece, or at least the trial that he's supposed to win the Golden Fleece. And there are a few parts that are worth noting. Obviously, all the names and the sort of lineages being notably part of the Greek epic tradition. You get a lot of that in things like the Iliad, the Odyssey, I'm sure. And there's also the little thing about epithets. You saw again, as we saw Jason invoking Hecate, she had an epithet there. He called upon her by. Let me just double check the find it. One moment. Yeah. Could have sworn that. 1 second, I'm losing it now. Yeah, Hecate's epithet. No. There it is, Hecate Brimmer, which again I don't know the significance of it. But he calls upon her as in a specific aspect of her as a goddess, which I think is interesting. That's what I want to point out. But yeah, those are all interesting aspects of it. And obviously the sort of tradition here is significant too. You can see a bit of Greek culture here that comes up quite a lot. The idea of supplicants being sacred to Zeus, and of what you call it. It being improper to slay a person whom you've shared bread and food with. Now, even though he doesn't, like, obviously, Aetus doesn't want to entertain Jason's quest here, because he's acting in an honourable manner and is forthright in all this, he kind of can't refuse him, despite him wanting to, and he sets him an impossible task. Which kind of, honestly, thinking of, from what I know of Greek mythology, I think is a lot of the setup for a lot of these heroic quests is they want something that the king or whoever is setting the quest doesn't want to give them, but because of the way they're acting they can't be outright refused, so they set an impossible task, which then obviously they go off and complete. Which actually, if you think about it, it's sort of mirrored later on in literature in the sort of courtly romance tradition of the Arthurian knights under Eleanor of Aquitaine. Now here's something to say as well. I don't know how I know all of this. I've said before that sometimes I remember things that I don't know how I remember them. Like the weird memories I got from the goo that I ate that made me smart. This is one of them. No idea where any of that's come from. I've never read any of the other Greek epics, or any courtly romance for that matter. But I do know that that is true. So yeah, do with that what you will. There's another thing that I want to point out here, which harkens back to some of the other... Fair enough, thank you kindly, and ask for the hard drink. Slancher, you good elf. Don't know why I banged that on the table. I hope that wasn't too loud. Yeah, thank you for that kindly ask. Oh yeah, there is another thing that I want to point out here, or a comparison I want to make. It goes back to some of my oldest readings that I suspect quite a lot of people won't have seen. So I'll sum up what I mean for you before I make the comparison. But back when I was reading the sort of early stuff of the Jack London, specifically Call of the Wild and Whitefang, there are scenes in both of those books where the two main characters, who are dogs, Buck and Whitefang, both come to find human masters whom they find who treat them well and who are kind. And the way Jack London describes it is finding the love master, a master whom they love. And when I was reading those books, it occurred to me, and I mentioned that the way that the love masters were described, and even with the later, I love the later one of his, Brown Wolf, the way that love is described by London of these dogs isn't in like a positive manner, or I didn't find that a positive manner. Because he describes it as a sort of need that they have, much in the way that they have hunger, or they have like a need for warmth or shelter. They need these things. They have need of the people who they love. Love isn't like an active, pleasant force for them. It's a requirement that is built into them, and one that can only be answered by one person. In their case, it's the two love masters. And it occurred to me that it was quite a sort of horrible way to describe it. It almost felt like an eldritch plague, like something that changed them and made them less, made them wallow without this thing they hadn't needed before, like an addiction. And the way that Medea's love here is described puts me in mind of that. Because for all that it, there's some like lovely moments in the description of it, the fire burning in the chest and all that. What actually happens to her is kind of horrible when you think about it. Like she is struck by, a god being above her and made against her will to fall in love with this man, to the extent that it persuades her to act against the interests of her family, to risk her reputation, her livelihood, everything that she's cared about before, just to help him. And while there's argument to be made about romance, although I think given the sort of ending of the story of Jason and Medea, there's not a good argument to be made. Objectively, that's a horrifying and terrifying thought, right? It's something that makes you feel small and insignificant. The gods essentially violate her free will, force her against her own choices to do this thing, to help this man, whom she has never met before. And obviously this is sort of a myth, so there is elements of parable to it. And I think the argument here, or the thing that's meant to be demonstrated, is that Love makes people do foolish things, overmasters them, drives them to a foolish action, and that being natural love, which obviously the gods sort of represent natural forces, but I don't know. It's sort of a grim fate, and in thinking about it, it does make me somewhat uncomfortable with the idea. I always want to go back to some of the EJAT London at some point and go over that again because it's a good comparison. But I'll save that for when I run out of books, which, given the size of the library, should only be about 70 or 80,000 years, you know? Yeah. 800, God. That is probably a sign that I should call it, yeah. You're very welcome, Abbe. I do once again thank all of you for being here, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. I don't know if Wild is still here or has been taken away by the storm, but I hope that she is safe and well wherever she is. Good night, Blake. Yeah, I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, whatever time and place it should be for you. Let's see about seeing if there's someone online to raid. Very welcome, Naska. There's no one currently who I follow who's online to raid. Let's see about... Who was it who raided us yesterday? Creative Garden, let's see if they're online. Creative Garden. Nope, they're offline. Does anyone have someone who is online who they think I should raid into? I'm happy to take suggestions here, because otherwise I'll just end it and go nowhere. Which always feels like a bit of a waste. I realised actually that after I'd finished reading Mr. Harrison's Confessions, I just ended the stream without thinking about it, and I sort of regretted it. So, yeah. Do any of you have anyone who's live who you think would be worth raiding into? I'm open to suggestions. I know a lot of channels have this as like a routine you can fill out, you can fulfill for a bunch of channel points, but I just like to do it. Any suggestions, any at all? Go once, going twice. Well, don't seem like. In which case, let's see this. There are some people who I know. Now we'll just call it, I guess. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough then. Then we'll just call it then. I can always read out another day. Yeah. I do thank you all for being here. I hope you have as I say, hope you have a lovely rest of the day. I've already done my whole spiel and then I got distracted. Yeah. What was it? Oh, there was something else. Oh yeah. The coming. Yeah. Tomorrow. Do we have any plans for tomorrow? I haven't given it tomorrow any thought. Yeah, we'll probably be back tomorrow. I'm still feeling good. Don't know what we'll read. Don't know how long we'll go. But yeah, we will be back tomorrow. I think. Is there anything here that is particularly notable? I don't know. We'll figure it out. Maybe we'll go back the turn of the screen. That's a good idea. Anyway, but yeah. My head is all over the place now all of a sudden. Right, but yeah, thank you everyone for being here. And as always, ta-ra.